On this episode of the show, I have with me Dmitri Sedov. He is Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Allvue, and we're going to be talking about transformation as a journey with no destination, and we'll tell you what that means and what Dmitri thinks about that, because obviously a lot of things have changed within the technology landscape. Roads that were not on the radar before have popped up. How do you prioritize? How do you productize? How are you sure that you're on the main road and not lost somewhere, well, where things could be unsuccessful? A couple other areas we'll try to cover as well with Dmitri. But Dmitri, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. Before we start, can you tell us all what you guys do at Allvue?
So Allvue is a technology and solutions provider to alternative investment markets. We've been around for many, many years, and originally we're known by two different brands, Black Mountain and Alter Return. Maybe 5-6 years ago, we came together as one Allvue, and that really gives us an opportunity to service our customers who are predominantly asset managers in the alternative space and private capital, as well as banks and fund admins across the investment lifecycle. We provide technology, we provide software solutions, and increasingly we're starting to provide more and more data and AI capabilities, and this is where my role comes in.
Awesome. All right. I guess, this conversation started because I referenced if digital transformation is a term that has been around almost too long. And you actually brought up a great observation by saying it's more of a journey and there might not be a destination. I think maybe we start there by what your thoughts are there, and we'll dive into the rest of it.
Yeah, I recall that initial discussion you and I had, and it was actually thought-provoking for me as well. I remember hanging up the phone and then thinking, how do I myself keep up with technology and innovation and all the changes that we're seeing? And I think the short answer to that, Amir, is I really don't, because no matter how hard I try, the advances, the collective knowledge, I think, in our industry will certainly outpace my own aspirations. So by the time I set my goal to, be X or achieve Y, somebody has already achieved it and thought about 3 other steps ahead of me. So I think one way I generally approach innovation and transformation is just with good old curiosity and being open-minded and saying, look, there's so many different ways you can get to whatever destination you may be trying to get to, be that, maybe move your stack into the cloud, or maybe adapt and adopt to AI innovations, or perhaps modernize your applications, whatever that ultimate outcome that you are seeking. I don't think there's any one specific way to get to it. And the more you fixate on one way, the more likely you will be left behind. Absolutely.
And obviously, to preface this conversation, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed, because obviously it is interesting. We have had this term digital transformation. Obviously, we could go way back, but more recently we could talk about the cloud, right? That was a big thing. We've seen other minor trends come in. Obviously, now we're seeing the notion of AI overall. Whatever your maturity is around AI or where you're at, it is the next big quote unquote transformation. And I joke sometimes, I think digital transformation, going back to the notion of the cloud itself, is still in progress for some people. And here we are with the next step. And I guess when we're talking about this evolution of technology, I think some people, when I speak to them, mention that this is just an iteration. It's not something new. It's an iteration of previous technology that AI helps with these solutions that we didn't have before. Fair. When you look at a company, the company's job is obviously to execute, deliver product, service, goods. Technology is there to enable. When they do have these opportunities to look at transforming capabilities, from an internal perspective, do they view this as a journey, or is it a checkbox? I need to do this because it's going to help my company. Is there a difference there, or is there potentially, is it one and the same?
Well, maybe we can unpack this a bit. I completely agree with you that the transformation and the notion that there's something new constantly being invented and you need to keep up with that, I think is a bit of a faulty premise. It's certainly a reinterpretation and advancement on an ever-growing base of knowledge that we have in what is possible in technology, and it will continue this way. Um, I don't necessarily agree with a notion that anybody is doing anything just to check off the box. I mean, there's certainly a question of career success and career risk, and certainly as incoming executives try to, leave their print on an organization, they may be doing something for these reasons. But more often than not, I think, unless you're in an extremely unique or small environment. In a larger institution, you typically tend to have checks and balances, right? If you're just doing something to check the box and it does not have any return on investment, or 6 months later of doing something to check the box that it does not pan out, and there's no outcome of any kind, even any learning from that, then I don't think you'd be long for the job. So with these fringe cases aside, where people are just, rubber stamping some decisions, I do think that most of us operate with quite a number of unknowns. And so decisions are often made with the best knowledge we have at hand, and that knowledge is not necessarily exhaustive or sufficient. If you had to, operate in an environment of total transparency and kind of certainty, if you will. So, I think, the decisions that are being made are certainly with the best intention. Now, as we think of the journey of any company from, let's say the current state to some future state, maybe 2-3 years down the road, looking at a 3-year strategy, for example, I do think there are some inflection points, and these inflection points are driven by the innovations and by the maturity of these innovations and to what extent you can take advantage of them. Right? If I, for example, were in, I don't know, 2000s, and you asked me to build a website to sell something online, I mean, we can build a website and we can probably sell something online, but the whole notion of e-commerce was still quite immature at the time. And so, those who came first, certainly not a lot of them survived, right? If you think of the dot-com crash. Those who came after came with more knowledge and more certainty and certainly lessons learned. And they were more successful following that inflection point. Cloud computing and move to the cloud. I don't know if you remember even, 10, 15 years ago, all these stories of data getting lost and transformations going bad and, lack of interoperability across the cloud providers and the costs associated with moving to the cloud and the risks and the worries, all of which were quite substantiated worries at the time. Today, you think of the cloud, and more often than not, it's a choice of the platform provider and the cost. Right? The road is well traveled. So I think AI is certainly still in that early stages where there will be a number of attempts. There will be certainly many failures. The technology itself will have to mature. The one differentiating thing about today, I think, is the speed at which this technology is evolving. And I think you can trace back the accelerated speed of each subsequent transformation back to the days of e-commerce, back to the days of early computing, and certainly back to the days of early AI and machine learning and kind of neural networks and sort of the AI 1.0. But it is quite remarkable how quickly things develop and how quickly certain technologies and certain approaches, are proved out or disproven, giving folks like myself probably a bit more ammunition, a bit more certainty, or at least not as long of a time of learning as we are used to.
I love that. And I guess when we're talking about, and I do agree with you, I think most executives are making decisions, that support the business and are thinking long term. I think all those things hold true. When you think about the stakeholders of decisions from the technology side, obviously we're in support of the business, we're collaborating. I understand that. When we paint the picture of the future of what can be versus what will be, I guess this transformation, right? This journey that we're on. When you look at that roadmap and you look at the stakeholders and you have to think about prioritizing and you have to think about delivering things that support the business in both of that long-term and short-term vision, that goal, I always thought that's one of the hardest things to do because expectations seem to rise and then you have to temper them all at the same time. It's a very, a balancing act. When you look at this, especially AI, where a lot of people have interest because it'll impact their world. How have you seen that balance? How does that conversation look from your perspective of, that long-term and short-term?
Well, I've seen it in so many different flavors. I mean, we'll be here for another 2 hours if I've given you, the full inventory of how I've seen AI implemented and attempted and botched and debated. And I'm sure that's true for quite a lot of people who appear on this podcast. I will say this. I think what I've seen work really well, and what we are trying to do at Allvue is really kind of have one beacon there, and that is the kind of the desired outcome with our customers. And that may not always be the case when AI is being thought of as, for example, an internal enabler, in which case a customer would be perhaps an internal stakeholder. We think of the customer or client as an external stakeholder. And the question for us at this point in time is, can we serve them better with AI than we can do now without AI? And to what extent that will actually add value to our existing offerings. We also I think have a tremendous benefit of being part of the Vista Equity Partners portfolio, one of their portcos. Vista has certainly been one of the top private equity firms out there for decades, and I think they've done a very focused pivot to AI, or perhaps a progression to AI being the centerpiece of their investment thesis, being the centerpiece of enabling this agentic future, where quite a lot of the software companies that they invest in could absolutely demonstrate that return on investment. It won't come overnight. The technology is certainly quite early days when it comes to agentic AI. But I think both within Allvue, but also within the broader ecosystem of Vista, who is our current sponsor, there is a very firm belief that we are sort of on the precipice of that inflection point where quite a lot of the capabilities that many of the portfolio companies within Vista portfolio solve for today with perhaps more deterministic software can be actually solved with agentic and more probabilistic approach that comes with generative AI and LLMs. And, even just last week, I saw a demo that came out of a hackathon that our team participated alongside with a few other portfolio companies of Vista, and the Allvue team won in a competition for building multi-agent prototype. That was specifically focused on the back office, on financial operations and accounting and reporting of GPs, of general partners, or private equity or private credit asset managers. What blew my mind, Amir, is that they won having spent 24 hours building a prototype, and when I saw it, I could not believe it. It was remarkable how fast the technology has enabled our team to orchestrate multiple agents working in concert with each other to perform a number of tasks that are, typically performed by accountants and and reporting specialists within financial services firms, I was blown away. Right? And I thought I've seen a lot of things, and the fact that they were able to do it in 24 hours, and the fact that it actually worked effectively, gives me quite a lot of hope and optimism over the future of this technology and the pace of the transformation at this particular point in time, at this inflection point in the technological journey. But again, it's going to continue, to your point, evolving.
Absolutely. I guess something that I bring up and I'm always curious is, through the various technology booms, you've seen companies take different approaches, different strategies, different lengths of time to adopt, to consider adopting. I think with AI, we are seeing, as you said, an appetite, right? An interest to at least figure out if it's right, have those conversations. And you're seeing a lot of companies build prototypes, try things, test things. As you had said, kind of these roads that were previously not on the radar, giving people an opportunity to explore those. This is a case where a lot of companies are dealing with bleeding edge tech, and maybe they had not before. And maybe that's a part of the learning process. I guess when you're in the midst of going through and trying to work with a technology that's as fast moving as we are seeing with AI right now, is there a concern, or is there a thought that there's a trade-off between I might miss the boat versus we're also completely in uncharted territory, and we have to be understanding that the learning and the failure, that cycle is required for the muscles and development, all that stuff?
Both. I think the answer is both. And I also think it depends on who you ask. I think learnings and curiosity come at a price. And there will always be, in a corporate context, people who are advocating for learnings and curiosity and bleeding edge. And they're right, because not doing it means you will probably fall behind, at least for a period of time. And then there will be others who will be advocating for healthy spend and return on investment. And certainly any new tech comes with a high price tag and greater chance of failure, which is in and of itself is a price to pay. If nothing else than time. And more often than not, it's time and money. So I think it's a healthy balance. And I don't think there is a particular prescription. Allvue and myself, we are within financial services industry. I can argue that financial services has been much more receptive to AI in general than many other industries. I think they being our industry, we see opportunities to increase efficiencies, create faster, better working software, perhaps rethink the way people operate, rethink the workflows. And a lot of that comes from a very, very thick legacy that this industry had for decades and decades. So it is also a point in time and the moment in the overall technology upgrade cycle. Just so happens that we're also living in the age of Gen AI, which is quite fortuitous, which means that not only you can upgrade your tech, there's a lot of firms that still operate off spreadsheets. There are a lot of investment managers who are still on premises. They're not in the cloud. And so all of a sudden, there is this perfect storm of opportunities. Yes, a lot of them are bleeding edge. But to your earlier point, a lot of them are also just building upon years and years of technological advancement that financial services hasn't really taken full advantage of just yet. And so there comes a moment where we can say, wow, we not only can upgrade our technology, upgrade our data operations, upgrade the way we present our capabilities to our customers, how they interact with our content and applications, but you could also try a few new things. It's very different, industry by industry, I'm sure, and I can't speak for any other industry really. One very close friend of mine just raised close to $100 million and launched the first AI therapist, Ash. And his company is Slingshot.ai. And if you want to invite him later or perhaps talk to someone from that space, I think financial data is complicated. Try training LLM on mental health and make it in a way that actually feels like you're talking to a real therapist. Pales in comparison to to what we're trying to do here. So it really depends. But I do think it's a perfect point in time for quite a lot of firms who have been on the sidelines of perhaps more aggressive digital transformation to leapfrog. I don't think that the bleeding edge AI, as we read in the news, is for everyone. In fact, I feel like it's for just those few who can afford to fail fast and can pay for that failure with no regrets. I do think that over the next 12 to 24 months, we will see a more rapid than usual maturation of this tech. And I also think that kind of going, to kind of the 80-20 rule, there will be solutions that will be pre-built off the shelf that you can just take from the shelf and then add your flavor to it, perhaps with not as much risk and not as much cost. But that's to be seen. That's my thesis today. Sort of like AI as a service, if you will, and that's what we are working on at Allvue for sure.
I mean, I everything you said, I completely agree with, and I guess this does represent an interesting opportunity. You kind of alluded to it, and if you have been a laggard, I mean, you didn't participate in some of the other things. You've business wise, you don't have justification. You all of a sudden see something like AI, and you're like, oh, I can actually maybe leapfrog a couple of innovation cycles, and I'll be on the latest, and potentially we'll see some benefit. That has dangers in of itself, but also it does represent an opportunity if you have, as you said, some of this is still on-premise spreadsheets within your industry. That leapfrog, it will bring a lot of change because obviously you have to come with it a lot of change management. When you think about, I guess, that change management side, and maybe there's two questions in there. One is, if you are going to make that huge leapfrog, I mean, you're just rewriting all the rules of what you've done before, and that has challenges. If you're a company that has been progressing, I'm kind of curious how big a change you will start seeing within your internal, and maybe we're just talking about the technology side of things of what kind of changes you're going to be expecting to see.
I will say two things, Amir, to this question. One is, I probably would caution against any type of change as a monolith decision, right? Switching from A to B. I would say the smart move on the part of any technology and data executive would be to say, look, we've built engines that generate revenue, produce value for our clients. How can we make these engines better, more efficient, as opposed to say, you know what, let's stop this engine, let's go and build out a new one. Now, that may be the case in some companies who, have been true laggards and have not invested in technology. But let's think of those as outliers. Fundamentally, the companies that are successful today, there's no reason to stop the engines, kill those, and start rewriting new engines. So I would always advocate for incremental improvement and thinking about to what extent specifically AI would be beneficial on the margin, and then kind of gradually increase that margin. That mitigates the risk, that takes advantage of what you have, that certainly builds upon the value rather than resets the bar. That's number one. That is just my personal philosophy around that. And the second part is more driven by kind of the environment that we live in. I tend to think of three things when I think of Allvue solutions: open, interoperable, and modular. And each of these words, they sort of correlate. But when I think of open, I am very sober about the fact that very few companies would buy exclusively Allvue and nothing else when it comes to financial operations and investment solutions. It's always a combination of things that you rely on today. And you would be smart to rely on a combination of providers because everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. In that context, the idea of seeing this as an open ecosystem where things can coexist, I think is quite important today. Related to that is that interoperability. If you are using multiple platforms, you should expect that they would work with each other, that you can log on and into different platforms with the same sign-on, or that the technology can allow you to move your data set from one place to the next without having to hire like an army of people to do that. So that interoperability is very important. And then modularity, I think, is more the kind of the philosophy that we have at Allvue. We would like to provide our customers with capabilities that they can pick and choose from and integrate into their stack. Of course, we hope that they can use the entire stack from Allvue, but realistically, they won't. And the modules that they get should be valuable in and of themselves. If you think back about, to those 3 points, I think what they imply is risk mitigation as well, right? You don't need to necessarily buy the whole thing. You don't need to stop the engines. You don't need to buy a big monolith solution. I mean, someone like Microsoft or AWS would love for you to take the entire stack, of course, but more often than not, you wouldn't. And that's okay. So I think that goes back to your question of managing expectations, managing resources, managing innovation versus cost. My philosophy, as long as you have an open mind about having multiple applications coexisting, as long as you are expecting interoperability, and as long as you are thinking in modular ways, whether you're selling your services and software and data to clients or you are the buyer, I think you can get to that balance. It's not going to be perfect, but you can certainly get further.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess when you think about your roadmap, the roadmap you present, the discussions you have with executive stakeholders, if we're looking at something like enterprise AI, and how quickly things are moving, I do see a lot of stuff at technology companies moving very quickly. Enterprise AI seems to be all over the map. I think some are adopting it, some have centers of excellence, some are deployed. I mean, there's a whole gamut in there, so it's difficult to generalize. But when you're looking at your roadmap and you're thinking about how long you can look out in the future when you are seeing the development of various foundational models quickly iterating, is there for you as a data and analytics leader, is there a timeline of you don't want to look past within this particular space, or is it a case of, listen, functionality and business impact, some of the tech will change, but hopefully the impact will give us certain results that we're seeing in a certain trajectory? Can you plan very far in advance, I guess is a question.
Look, you have to plan, and you certainly don't want to be sitting still and waiting for the technology to reach a certain point, because as you and I established earlier, it is always going to be a journey. So entering into that river, upstream, downstream, you have to enter and swim or sail, and not just sit on the bank and wait for it to flow. So I think that's never an option, just to wait. I think the more important question is what's the business outcome you're looking to achieve, rather than is technology mature enough for me to take advantage of it? You're never taking advantage of any one tech. And also, when we think of LLMs, yes, it is a material change from the previous generations of AI, but it is also not that transformational if you are the student of AI and if you've been using AI in the past. It has substantially improved over the last couple of years, primarily driven by OpenAI and Anthropic and the innovations with LLMs. But those of us who've been in the data space even 10 years ago, you use natural language processing and you use machine learning to improve your data quality and to manage your data more effectively, to generate synthetic information. All of that has been around for a while, and there are different degrees of confidence and certainty that came out of that tech. And I remember the days when we used. I remember I was running a startup, and we were using AI to establish sustainability patterns for investment managers to report to their asset owners. And I remember investing in certain tech, not to be named, and I was very happy that the quality of the output was about 30% certainty. The wow, 30% better than zero because, at least that gets me 30% there. And then the rest of it has to be done with some programmatic deterministic output. But I was so happy, 10 years ago with the 30% accuracy that at the time AI was providing. Today, if I don't get 80%, I get cranky, right? Will there be a point when you can interact with AI and it's 100% accurate? I don't know. And I don't want to wait for it. I certainly will plan my roadmap with or without it. But if I can get through that journey faster because technology has become, more available, more mature, has helped me accelerate certain things. Hey, kudos to me, kudos to the decisions we made, right? I planned for 3 years. I managed to, finish that journey within a year and a half. That's even better. We can start thinking about something bigger sooner.
Absolutely. And maybe last question, tying back to obviously this whole discussion started because I mentioned the term digital transformation seems to have been around for the last 30 years and it's still the term we still use. I guess when you think of everything we kind of spoke about and you think about AI and we're thinking about the impact to actual jobs and jobs themselves fundamentally changing over the next couple of years. And I don't know if we know what that is yet. I think there's a lot of guesses out there. When you think about the human in the loop and you think about the change management required, how much do you speak with stakeholders to kind of help them understand that human in the loop, that change management component when it comes to adopting some of these newer technologies, making sure they realize where they fit in side by side with this new tech?
This is the topic of conversations regularly, as you can imagine, in part because we all are trying to figure out to what extent human in the loop is necessary and how much of those humans we need in the loop, how many of them at this given point in time, which is quite tactical and short term. I think there is the greater question of transformation in the workforce. It certainly seems inevitable at this point. The extent to which we can predict which careers will become obsolete and which careers will pop up from this kind of new generation of tech is hard to say, but I'm pretty certain that there will be a transformation rather than a massive reduction. It has happened in every other inflection point. And yes, certain jobs, they become obsolete and others are created. I have 2 young kids and, thankfully, they're still probably about 7 or 8 years away from college. And I'm grateful because that gives us pretty good runway to figure out exactly will college exist in the same format by the time they're ready for it? And B, what would I recommend to my daughter, in terms of her major? If you asked me today, I actually wouldn't be able to answer that question. And I'm grateful I have another 6 or 7 years to figure that out with her. But it is transformational for the workforce, no question about it.
Yeah, I'm with you. My daughter's about the same timeline away. And I'm glad we have a little bit of time to see how things play out. I do joke a lot on the podcast. I do know there will be a benefit of AI, that I'm convinced. But also, I'm very convinced that whenever a majority of people predict something, they tend to be wrong because that many people are normally not right about predictions. It's just human nature. So we will have to see.
Sure.
But
we'll have to see. Just stay curious. I'm optimistic, Amir. I don't know about you. I'm certainly very optimistic about the future.
Oh, I think. We didn't get into it, but I think democratization and shifting technology solutions into the hands of the end user, I think that's a game changer. I really think we'll see the entire life cycle of how software and tech is developed ripped apart over the next 3 to 4 years. Maybe even sooner. I think we'll lose a lot of what we have clung on to. I think the way Scrum has run for tech teams in the last 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years might not be needed, especially if your end user, your stakeholder can sit down and get something to a very semi-usable state, obviously with a lot of help to get to production. Requirements are clear when you have a picture. I agree with you.
Spot on. Well, maybe a topic for the next podcast.
There you go. I think we just came up with part 2. Dmitri,
Exactly. It was great talking to you.
thanks for taking the time. If somebody does want to ask you a follow-up question, what's a good way of connecting with you?
I would just direct them to our website. It's allvuesystems.com. It's a funny spelling. It's ALLVUE systems.com. And we certainly are trying to stay up to date there.
Okay. Awesome. Dmitri, again, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amir.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. I'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, 2 things. One, obviously, Dmitri covered a lot of ground. We went a little bit over, so I appreciate his time. And we talked about the transformation and really being on a journey and not having a destination. I know we call it digital transformation. We kind of covered that. Going into uncharted territories, how companies are handling it. If you do have a bit of a head start, or you're starting from zero, there's different ways to approach this. And Dmitri covered all those. And we talked a little bit about AI and some change management in there as well. So share this episode with somebody else who might benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.